Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our council meeting for Monday, May the 8th. We are going to be going into close this evening, so the recommendation is that a closed meeting of council be held on May the 8th, 2023 at 5:30 p.m. in accordance with Section 239 2B and Section 239 3.1 of the Municipal Act 2001 to consider the following. Striking Committee, Section 239 2B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, and council orientation, Drainage Act, Section 239 3.1. The meeting is held for the purpose of education or training the members. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously, so we will go into closed and reconvene at 7 o'clock. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our open council meeting on May the 8th. We will now read the motion to go into open, and the recommendation is that council reconvenes an open session at 7:02 p.m. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that carries. So on to our moment of reflection. Last week, the Township of Wilmot wants to recognize two significant events that passed. So on Friday, May 5th was the National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirited People, also known as Red Dress Day. Red Dress Day is an annual event that was started by the Red Dress Project and aims to raise awareness of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people across Canada. We must remember, honor, and take action against these tragic events. The Township of Wilmot joins communities across the nation in strongly condemning gender and racially motivated violence. For more information, please visit wilmot.ca/Indigenous Relations. Also, this past weekend, on May the 6th, was the coronation of King Charles III, which took place in London, England. And I know some people were wondering why we wanted to mention it, but since we are a constitutional monarchy, we only exist in this government structure due to the Crown. So it was an opportunity this past weekend for Canadians to reflect on the role that the monarchy plays in Canada's political system, the contributions the monarchy has to Canada's history and culture, and the important role that it continues to play in Canadian society. On behalf of the Township of Wilmot, we extend the best wishes to His Royal Highness King Charles III and his wife Camilla as King and Queen of the United Kingdom and all other Commonwealth realms. I will now turn it over to Councillor Cressman for our territorial acknowledgement, please.
We have gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth, and we should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, work together as a community. And just a personal reflection on that last line, that line resonates with me. I would add farm on this land that others at one time walked. And I was reminded that this past weekend as I went to my second property where at one time was a spring and was the Neutral people's camping ground prior to Europeans arriving. And I always am reminded of that. Unfortunately, that spring is no longer there, courtesy of City of Kitchener and Waterloo Region wells in the Mannheim proximity, drying that spring and the tributary up. But I am reminded that and the flint arrowhead that my father found on that property, I guess walking a one-furrow plow many years ago.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Does anybody have a disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act to declare? Okay, seeing none. We have a few additions to the agenda, items 10.2, as well as items 13.2 and 13.3. And as for the Thank you. And as for the adoption of the agenda, Councillor Dunstall, it's come to my attention that you would like to amend the order of the agenda for tonight's meeting and that you'd like item 15, which is your notice of motion, moved to item 8. And please just note for all of council, in order to make this amendment, we would need to have a 2/3 majority in order to amend the order of the agenda based off of Robert's rules. So the recommendation is that the agenda as presented for May 8th, 2023 be adopted as amended for the notice of motion being changed to item 8 from 15. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. So then we will go on to the notice of motion, which we just have one for this evening for council to consider, and I will call on our deputy clerk to display Councillor Dunstall's notice of motion. And Councillor Dunstall, would you like to go ahead and read your notice, or would you prefer me to? You're muted, Councillor Dunstall.
Sorry, through you, Mayor. It's difficult for me to see it on my screen, so if you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Whereas the Township of Wilmot is committed to the health and safety of all residents, and whereas the Township of Wilmot collects user fees relating to facility rentals, now therefore be it resolved that staff be directed to allocate user fees associated with the rental of the New Hamburg Community Centre on May 25th, 2023 to facilitate a discussion between the Waterloo Regional Police Services and seniors within the Township of Wilmot to the Council Special Events budget. The recommendation is, my apologies, that has been reprinted. Sorry. So that is the motion of Councillor Dunstall, so it's already been moved. Would you like to speak to your motion, Councillor, before we get a seconder?
Sure, thank you. Through you, Mayor. I think most of the people on this panel know that Wilmot's population, 55 plus population, is approximately 40%, which is much higher than the provincial and the national average. And as such, we find that our seniors at times are some of our most vulnerable constituents. We have been working with the police to get 2 one-hour sessions with our seniors, and I am looking to have the fee waived for the New Hamburg rental. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dunstall. May I please have a seconder to get this on the floor? Seconded by Councillor Cressman. Council, does anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Wilkinson?
Yeah, I'd actually like to put forward an amendment to this. So part of it, I have no problem with the motion. It's just that I'd like to add an amendment that, or through you, Mayor, that the staff be directed to research municipal best practices and report back to council on a policy relating to councillor access to municipal facilities to conduct constituency business. And if there's any questions on that amendment, once it's on the floor, I'm happy to answer.
Okay, so just procedurally, we now need to deal with Councillor Wilkinson's amendment. That will be separate of the motion until we've dealt with that. So may I have a seconder for Councillor Wilkinson's amendment, seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any comments on Councillor Wilkinson's amendment? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. So now, as amended, Councillor Dunstall's motion, does anybody have any other comments or questions before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that also carries unanimously. All right. So on to item number 9, which is minutes of the previous meeting. The recommendation is that the minutes for April 17th, 2023 be approved. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? And that carries. And on to our public meetings, which is the Delton Rabling Municipal Drain Engineers Report. And so this public meeting is in respect to the Delton Rabling Municipal Drain. The purpose of this meeting is to discuss the design of the drainage system. Any questions relating to assessment or cost sharing are not to be discussed tonight and will be discussed at a later date through the Court of Revision. The recommendation is that the engineer's report dated February 7th, 2023 for the Delton Rabling Municipal Drain for improved drainage in Lot 31 and 32, Concession 3, Block A, Township of Wilmot, be considered in accordance with Section 42 of the Drainage Act, and that bylaw 2023-XX as attached to this agenda be given a first and second reading. Provisionally adopt the report if the report is not referred back to the engineer and the petition remains valid after consideration of the report, and that the date of the Court of Revision be scheduled for May 29th, 2023, if bylaw 23-XX as attached to this agenda is provisionally adopted, with Councillor Stuart Cressman, Councillor Chris Wilkinson, and Councillor Javier Sadu appointed as members for the Court of Revision. So I will turn it over to Mr. Curtis, if you could please introduce our report.
Thank you, Chair Salonen. This report outlines the Delton-Ribling drainage report and recommends that the report be provisionally adopted and the Court of Revision be scheduled for May 23rd, 2023. As per the Drainage Act, if a section of 78 request is confirmed, Council may proceed by giving first and second reading to the bylaw at this meeting. Third reading will occur at the Council meeting following the May 29th Court of Revision meeting. In addition, Councillor Cressman, Wilkinson, and Sadu have been appointed to the COR, Court of Revision, at a previous council meeting. We also have Curtis McIntyre and John Kunze of K-Smart Drainage Engineers, and I think they're here to add to the report.
Great. So as our delegation on this matter, Mr. McIntyre, you have 10 minutes for your presentation, and please go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Salonen and members of council. I am Curtis McIntyre, and I'm pleased to present our report on the Delton-Ribling Municipal Drain. I think, Mr. Curtis, if you have there you go, the watershed plan coming up on the screen here. Yeah, it's okay. Okay, just up to the first page, if you don't mind. Wonderful. Okay. So to help orientate everyone, the project was first initiated under Section 78 of the Drainage Act as a request from Karen and Gary Wagler, owners of property in Part Lot 32, Concession 3A, for improvement of the existing Delton-Ribling municipal drain. The watershed for the Delton-Ribling drain is located east of Oxford Road 5, in between north Bean Road and south of Bridge Street. The majority of the existing drain are open ditches, given the names A drain, C drain, and D drain. The upstream end of the A and B drains are small diameter tiles. So on the drawing, what you can see here, most of the solid black lines show municipal drains. The solid bold line is where we're proposing to do work on the Delton-Ribling drain. And the dashed bold line that kind of covers everything is the outside watershed of the Delton-Ribling drain. So the on-site meeting was held in March of 2021. The main takeaway from that meeting was that the Waglers were requesting to enclose the existing open ditch that crosses east to west through their field. And that open ditch is referred to as the C drain. Following the meeting, 2 additional components were added to the scope of work. It was determined after walking through the bush property on the ends lands that a lot of the existing ditches within their property had kind of become overgrown and required brushing maintenance and the ditch to be cleaned out. Also, upstream of the D drain is an existing privately constructed 8-inch tile through the Diamond property that services what used to be owned by the Brunn property. And the previous owner filed a petition under Section 4 of the Drainage Act to have this private tile incorporated as a municipal drain so that they would have a legal outlet for their lands. On July 12th, 2021, Wilmot Township appointed K-Smart Associates to prepare a report under that petition, and the incorporation of the existing tile as well as the original Section 78 work that I've been talking about have been combined into a single report. An information meeting was held with the owners and the watershed back in January this year to review the work and costs and share of assessments. And the information presented at that meeting is what we propose in our report. So in summary, this report proposes 556 meters of power brushing along the existing C and D drains, 183 meters of ditch bottom cleanout along what is known as the A drain on the Wagler farm. 350 meters of 18-inch diameter concrete tile will replace the existing ditch that goes east to west through the Wagler farm. Two new farm access crossings will be installed, one on the Ends property and one on the Den Lee Farms property that's south of Bridge Street, south of Bridge Street. And then the last thing is incorporating the 644 meters of 8-inch tile that goes up through the Diamond Farm and then across Diamond Road. One thing to note, typically no work under a drain report should occur prior to the report being adopted. The brushing and ditch work, cleanout work in this report has been completed in February though, because that was the best time of the year for the contractor to do it. And since it's more of a maintenance activity, the drainage superintendent has the authority to do that work themselves. We still put all those costs in that work in this report so that at the end of the day, the township, when it's all said and done, has one report that we can bill out to the whole watershed, all one billing, instead of having to do multiple under an old report. Yeah, that's all that. So page 15 of the report outlines the cost of the project. The estimate for the cost of construction is approximately $97,000. Approximately $7,000 will be provided in allowances. The majority of that amount is an allowance to the owner of the Bryn property for the original construction of that private tile that was actually back in like the late 1990s. So they paid for it under their own dime. So when it's becoming incorporated in a municipal drain, we provide them an allowance for that cost. And that's what's provided. The rest of the allowances are damages to crops when we construct it, since we don't know when that will occur, likely during the season when the crops are growing. Finally, the total engineering estimate included in this report, as well as construction supervision, total $44,000 for a total project cost of $150,000. At this meeting, as Mayor Sallin had mentioned, we won't get into how assessments were made. At the quarter revision at the end of May, we'll do that. And I'll just add that this report includes assessment schedules used for assessing out the costs of the proposed work here, as well as future maintenance costs that occur in the future. And finally, some of the work is grant eligible. The closing in the ditch is not, but some of the work we're doing is grant eligible, and Schedule C includes the amount of grant that is eligible under this project and the properties that would get that grant, and they would get that taken off their assessment before we bill it out at the end of the day. So that is all I have to present, and I'd be happy to field any questions from council or owners. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McIntyre. Council, are there any questions? Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, just one or two questions. First of all, in terms of the brushing, and that has already occurred in February, and I noticed that driving up that road and seeing the activity occurring. Who actually pays that invoice in advance when it's received? Who's kind of left holding the bag, so to speak, until everybody else has paid their money?
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Cressman. It is the township. All costs accumulated for construction of a drain is paid for by the township and held in the township's ledger. I think Township of Wilmot does charge interest. I think that might be a question for John or Petra Kelly. But at the end of the day, yeah, the township does bear those costs for now, and then we totally tally that up at the end of the job and assess it out as per this report. Yeah.
And through you, Mayor, one final question, I guess, having had a Union gas pipeline go through my property, I did have some control over when the work is done. As a landowner, do you have any control over if the ground is too wet, or et cetera, et cetera? I know crop damage, you can't avoid that, and it comes through. But if it's, I see a municipal drain going in kind of the worst conditions possible here in proximity to New Hamburg, and I ask if that was my land, I'd be pretty upset. But so I'm just saying, what's the leeway, or you take it when you can get it? Is that basically it?
Through you, Mayor. Excellent question. It is kind of a take it when you can get it. The reality of the drainage industry is there is more work than there are contractors out there. There was a period of time back in 2021 where the bids we were receiving were in excess of the construction dates were a year out. I've got one that crosses a lot of gas lines right now that we're working on right now that they worked all winter, they had a good winter, and they're 2 or 3 months ahead of schedule, but it is kind of we take it when we can get it. Now, most contractors are reasonable. Not all of them are. They have a schedule to go through, and we have times before where owners have requested for, delay for a month or two while I get my crops off. Where are they to go for the contractor? They can't go anywhere else. The next farmers on the next job are going to say the exact same thing. So we have had one contractor once, I won't mention any names, threaten to not come back to do the job, and I tend to get into the position of once the contractor has sort of stated the date that they're going to come on their tender, I don't want to push back on that because there could be real problems when they do. Because when the one time that they did delay, then they didn't even come back till after the crops were planted next spring. So it didn't really make it any better. So, but it's a good question. It's challenging. We put the allowances in the report to cover the fact that there would be destruction of crops nonetheless, and they're provided anyways. We can't update that. It's in there whether they're destroyed or not, but that's in there for that purpose. Yeah. So thank you for the question.
Any additional questions, councillors? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. McIntyre. And before we do continue on with the questioning of this, I realized I read this lovely recommendation and failed to get anyone to move or second it to get it on the floor. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Thank you. So just to reiterate again that the purpose of tonight's meeting is to discuss the design of the drainage system. With that in mind, are there any persons in the audience who wish to address council on this matter? Okay, seeing none. Clerk, do you see anybody online, or who's looking? Yes?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, no, there's no one online.
No one online? Okay, great. And just for great procedure here, I get to ask for a second and last time. Could anyone please indicate if they wish to address council on this matter? Okay. And prior to voting, I also need to reiterate that any petitioners who would like to remove their name from the petition, and likewise, would any other landowners like to add their name to the petition at this time? Okay, anybody online? Mr. Curtis? No? Okay. So going through all of that, I will now call the vote. All of those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. So this evening we have two presentations, and I will take this opportunity to remind the presenters that they will have 10 minutes to address council. So our first presentation is going to be Kira from Climate Action Waterloo Region. Kira, if you'd like to come up. Oh, my apologies, Councillor Dunstall?
Sorry, yes, through you, Mayor. I actually have to catch a flight, so I'm going to have to get off the call.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready there.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, Mayor Salonen and Council. Appreciate the time. Do we have slides for this? That's okay. Sorry. Thank you. So good evening. My name is Kira Chisholm, and I'm the Plan Manager with Climate Action Waterloo Region. And I'm joined this evening also in the audience by Mary Jane Patterson, the Executive Director of REAP Green Solutions, and Toba Davidson, the Executive Director of Sustainable Waterloo Region. We're here today to present the results of our greenhouse gas inventory and the report Our Progress, Our Path 2020. Can I get the next slide, please? Thanks. So a little bit about who Climate Action is. We are a collaboration between local organizations, municipalities, and community members focused on climate change mitigation or greenhouse gas emission reduction. And we are co-led by both REAP Green Solutions and Sustainable Waterloo Region in a collaborative partnership that is funded by the region and 3 cities, though working collaboratively with all 8. And at this time, I'd like to also say thank you to the contributions of Ashton Romani, who is our member of our committee that joins us regularly. At a high level, we coordinate the activities of our climate action plans and strategies in the region, measure and monitor progress towards our climate targets, and engage the community broadly in climate action initiatives. So, how did we get here? So back in 2013, we conducted the first community greenhouse gas inventory, and emissions are monitored from 5 sectors: transportation, workplaces, or the ICI sector, residential, agricultural, and waste. And this led to Waterloo Region's first climate action plan to achieve a 6% emissions reduction between 2013 and 2020. And all of our targets are based on a 2010 baseline year. And that is approximately an 842,000 ton reduction over the 7-year period. And so we're here today to close the chapter on this first climate action report and bring you the progress since we last came in 2017. So how did we do? So in 2017, we released the first iteration of our progress, our path, using the re-inventory data in 2015, and reported a 5.2% reduction compared to the 2010 baseline, so nearing that 6% target. We saw an increase in transportation emissions and decreases in both homes and workplaces. The changes we saw were largely attributed to the closure of the provincial coal power plants, and the reduced and some efficiency gains in the areas of homes and workplaces as well. So due to the abnormal circumstances of 2020 and the drastic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, we conducted a re-inventory for both 2019 and 2020. 2020 to account for the end of the 6% target period, and 2019 to look at a year that would more closely resemble business as usual. So the full report is attached to this presentation and available online on our website. And so in 2019, we see that we maintained some of the emissions reductions from the 2010 level at 3.7%, though that is an increase from 2015. And in 2020, we see a decrease of 14.4%, so more than doubling the 6% target. Though 2019 shows us that without the drastic impacts of the pandemic, we would have been unlikely to meet our 6% target in 2020. Could I get the next slide, please? So looking at a little more detail, we continue to see that the transportation of goods and people is the highest emitting sector, followed by the ICI and workplaces sector in second, and then our homes and residential emissions third. And while we did experience this upward trajectory of emissions between 2015 and 2019, we were encouraged to see that in the scope of this inventory, our per capita emissions, or the total emissions averaged per person, was not growing at the same rate as we experienced population growth. So this inventory is not a scope of all of the emissions, but what we have accounted for here is within the scope of responsibility of the municipalities and what we have the power to influence in our jurisdictions. And so we still do have much more progress to make as a community. Can I get the next slide, please? So thank you. A few key takeaways. Since 2010, as I mentioned, transportation emissions remain the largest contributing sector, and so it is essential that we change the ways that we move both goods and people throughout the region. Energy efficiency, fuel switching, and local energy generation provide a significant opportunity for transformational change across all sectors. And finally, there have been many promising initiatives that we are only beginning to see the greenhouse gas reduction benefits of. We are so encouraged by all of the stories throughout the full report, and the many more we're not able to capture without the report being 100 pages long. So lots of great work that are sowing the seeds of change. So where do we go from here? We came to you in June 2021 with Transform WR, which is our, and all 8 municipalities endorsed this strategy to an equitable, prosperous, resilient, and low-carbon community. This is our community's long-term strategy to reduce emissions 80% by the year 2050, and outlines actions to reduce emissions 50% by 2030. And so the results of this inventory do underscore the importance of transformative climate action, and strong collaboration to significantly reduce emissions from our community. Each municipality has an important role to play and leads many of the actions in this strategy. And in addition, our work at Climate Action continues to be raising awareness that this is everyone's strategy and everyone in our community has a role to play in taking strong climate action. So thank you so much for your time today. I'm happy to take any questions about this report.
Thank you very much, Kira. Councillors, do we have any questions? Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, I was interested to see agriculture increased in terms of its footprint, and in what way was that calculated? I know it'd be interesting. I know fertilizer use and best management practice is very important, and I know that's the debate within the agriculture community. If we already are protecting our nitrogen to make sure it isn't lost to the environment or to the water table, and splitting our nitrogen so that it's applied at two distinct times, closer to when the crop can make full utilization of it. It's estimated from the yield of the crop that year, or how much rainfall or sunlight. I'm just interested in those. I'm trying to improve, and I'm just trying to figure out what handles I have to work with.
Absolutely. I appreciate the question and the opportunity to explain that. So our full data management manual and the analysis protocol is available but in the short answer it is based on the heads of livestock and the manure management methods as the reliable data that we can use to as a marker and a baseline.
Through you, Mayor, just to follow up on that, because that is an area I was involved with agriculture research and research boards that did research on greenhouse gases across this country, and that is an area that you try to get a handle on. What is the number? Animals on pasture, animals in a feedlot, animals in a pig barn, chickens in a etc. So it's an ongoing piece of research to get an idea and an accurate piece of the puzzle in the whole production activities of both raising and then eventually the processing of those animals. So I'd be interested how this develops over time, because I've seen some of the research and some of the efforts put into it. So keep up the good work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, councillors? All right. Thank you very much, Kira, for joining us this evening. And now I will invite up Tova Davison from Sustainable Waterloo Region. Thank you, Tova, and you also have 10 minutes.
Thank you so much. Just wait for the slides. I'll start while the slides are coming up. So my name is Tova Davidson. I'm really happy to be here. I'm the Executive Director at Sustainable Waterloo Region, and every year I come to every council just to give a bit of an update as to what's been happening in our organization. And for those who don't know who we are, Sustainable Waterloo Region is a social enterprise nonprofit. We work at the levels of organizational sustainability and community level sustainability. So, for example, the township is a member of some of our programs. We support the township in its own work to measure what its carbon footprint is in its own operations. How do we help to reduce that footprint and to make you actually a more efficient and a more profitable organization through some of that work to reduce the carbon footprint. And that's just one example of the kind of work we do. We work in the areas of greenhouse gas mitigation, waste reduction, water footprints, as well as transportation, employee commuting, electric vehicle adoption, and green buildings. So there's a bit of a background for you. So next slide, please. When we looked at the year of 2022 and what happened among our network and in the community, what we actually saw was that there was this new normal everybody was talking about as a community as we were coming into a different way of operating in a pandemic world. and that we were sort of rethinking a lot of things. And that idea of rethinking brought us, of course, as an environmental group, into the 3 R's of sustainability. And we all know reduce, reuse, and recycle. But if you search now the R's of sustainability, there are 7, 8, 9, 10 R's that they're saying we should be thinking about. Refuse, regift, recreate. There's all sorts of ways you can in the sustainability world. And actually what that made us come to was the idea that in this new normal, we did a whole lot more we did reimagining and re-engaging and reinvigorating and recreating. And so we see 2022 as the year of Next slide, please. When we look at that year, some of the statistics of what happened in that year are here on the slide for you, and you should have a copy of our year-end report. It's available online, and I actually brought a paper copy, and I'm hoping you re-gift it from after you take a look at it, pass it along to someone else and share what's been happening. On the right-hand side of the slide that you see right now are the numbers for how many tons of greenhouse gases were reduced through one of our programs and through the organizations we work with, and it's the equivalent of nearly 20,000 cars off the road. And so the number of tons is a good thing to know, but for most people that doesn't have a whole lot of meaning. What do you mean by this many tons? So it's the equivalent of almost 20,000 cars off the road. And I'll share some of the other statistics as we go through the slides. Next slide. I won't dive too much into climate action. Kira just did a really beautiful job doing that. Really proud to be co-leading that work with REAP Green Solutions. And in 2022, with the re-inventory that Kira just talked about, we also have been doing some work about what is our governance structure and how do we reinvigorate and re-engage with everybody in the community to do that work that Kira talked about right at the end of her presentation, of understanding that this is everybody's role, everybody's strategy, and that we move forward from there. Next slide, please. We also work in partnership with the region of Waterloo on the TravelWise program, and this is actually a program to help employees choose not to drive alone to work. Because we see transportation is about half of our emissions, locally produced emissions in the region. This can include things like carpool matching software and active transportation planning. It's an emergency ride home reimbursement program, so if somebody carpools to work and then their carpool match gets sick or their kid gets sick, they have to go home, they could actually just take a taxi or a Lyft or an Uber and we'll pay them back for it, so it reduces the risk. There's also discounted transit passes, all those kinds of things, and that work is done to encourage people to consider another way of getting to work sometimes. And what we find is that employees who either use public or active transportation, and when I say public, I include carpooling in that, they're actually more connected and they're happier and they are less likely to call in sick and they're more productive at work. So there are business benefits as well. The numbers on the right-hand side of the screen are from our Bike Month, just an example of some of the statistics that we gather and the work that we do to engage employees. We also work in our Impact Network program. This is the one that the township is a member of, where we work with organizations to help them reduce their impact. And, you know, when I joined this organization 9 years ago, we were going out to organizations saying, you know, you should consider this. There is business benefits to you to do this. But in the last 2 years now, we've seen a real uptick of organizations coming to us because there's an understanding that sustainability not only is something that's their responsibility, but it's actually really good for business. So we've worked with organizations, for example, that have gone to a net zero. They have no emissions at all. They've doubled the size of their business and they saved $1 million doing it. Sustainability really is about being more efficient with the resources that you have, about being more productive. And so those are the kinds of stories. And here's some statistics for you to understand some of the impacts of the work that we do. We also were the idea holder of the Evolve One building, and if you haven't heard of Evolve One, I encourage you to come and see it. It's in the David Johnson Research and Tech Park in North Waterloo. It is Canada's first multi-tenant net positive energy regenerative building, certified by the Canadian Green Building Council, and it was done entirely within the developer's approved budget. That means that the developer paid for it fully. There was no funding to it. It is net positive energy, and you can see in that graph. It uses about 800,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. It's a fully electric building, and in the past 4 years since we commissioned the building and that was completed, it's generated between 106 and 120 plus percent of the energy that it needs. And for a landlord, what that actually means, or a building owner, and that would include a township, that means there's no operating costs for that building. They don't pay for electricity in this building. And so it is a really good business case, and that's why it was done within the developer's approved budget. We're really excited for this because it is very unusual for a developer or a building owner to share this kind of data, but we wanted to prove that it's possible. Finally, we talked about, in that first slide, you saw some numbers on trees planted. In 2021, we came up with this idea of microforests and renaturalizing areas in our community, areas that we thought of as undevelopable land, something else wasn't going to be planted there. And so in 2021, we did our first two with the help of the Aegis Foundation. We planted about 100 trees in each area. It's about the size of a residential building lot, not necessarily a rectangle, but about 100 trees in that size. And then we just thought, let's see how it goes. Obviously, it went very well because we had a lot of support that came behind us. And we did 6 more in 2022. So we've gotten 800 trees in the ground in just over a year. And this idea has gotten real wings under it, and we are now, we've planted 3 this year. As of the end of this week, there'll be 3 more planted, and there's another, I think we've got 9 more going in the fall, so we will be close to 20 forests in that much time, and it's going into schoolyards with underprivileged communities, it's going into corporate spaces, community parks, all of that sort of thing. So really excited for that as well. Next slide. I think that's it. Thank you so much for your time. Happy to answer any questions and would be very open to hearing from any of you and sharing more of what we do and how we can be helpful. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tova. Councillors, any questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, and I certainly look forward to being in touch. Oh, my apologies, Councillor Martin. Sorry there.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I have the privilege of being in Scotland right now. They tell me that all of the electricity that's being used here in Scotland is all through renewable resources, and that's quite impressive. I wasn't aware before coming, so I appreciate your report, and I certainly hope that we can continue to work on doing better in our part here in Wilmot Township.
May I respond? Thank you so much for that, and through you, Mayor. It's interesting because we now see a shift in energy generation. It used to be that creating energy from fossil fuels was cheaper than it was from renewables, but we have actually crossed the apex where now generation of energy is less expensive from renewables than it is from fossil fuels. So you see countries like Scotland that have made a big shift, and we see that around the world, and I think there's great opportunity here as well.
That's great. Thank you very much, Tova.
Thank you.
All right, on to the consent agenda. Do any members of council have any questions and want to remove any items from the consent agenda? Please indicate so now, as we will not take questions on consent agenda items unless they are requested to be moved to the regular agenda. Nope. All right, seeing none, the recommendation is that 11.1 and 11.2 be approved. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to reports. We have the recommendation that report COR 2023-33 Citizen Advisory and Quasi-Judicial Committee appointments for 2023 be received, and further, that the following individuals be appointed to various advisory and quasi-judicial committees. Now, to make sure that I get this correct, if I could actually have the clerk or the deputy clerk please bring up onto the screen those appointments. Just for background context, in closed session as well as before, council was provided with, yeah, you can put it up now, was provided with all of the applications. Thank you very much to everyone who did apply. And we went through in closed as to helping fill the openings. Yes, we greatly appreciate, and we had a pretty good intake of people wanting to be a part of our committees, so that is great. And I think we can have it moved up to see who is on each committee, or suggested to be on each committee. So the recommendation for Committee of Adjustment is Christine Kohler, Louise Lalonde, Steve Miller, Tyler Bowman, and Wayne Roth. For Heritage Wilmot and Castle Kilbride Advisory Committee, it's Al Yunker, Alan Doherty, Colleen Herner, Donna Patty Clark, Marge Rawell, Nicholas Borget, Renee Eby, Susan Hammer, Wade Brown, and Yvonne Zimma. And lastly, for Property Standards Appeals Committee and Dangerous Dogs Designation Appeals Committee, we have Blaine Blacktold, Dennis Mighton, Joseph Hennenhofer, Rachel Klinenberg, and Richard Feifel. My apologies. If I did say anybody's names wrong, my sincere apologies, but now that that is the recommendation, may I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Any questions or comments, councillors? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Again, thank you very much to everybody who did apply to be on a committee, and congratulations to those who were successful. You will be receiving correspondence from the township on how to proceed forward. Now we have our RFP award for the Nith River Promenade construction, and the recommendation is that the report CSR 2023-05 regarding the Nith River Promenade Trail construction be received, and further, that Lincoln Construction Incorporated be awarded the contract for the Nith River Promenade Trail and lighting enhancements at a value of $847,838, and further, that Lincoln Construction Incorporated be awarded additional project works up to a limit of $105,000 net of HST rebate to complete trail lighting and other provisional items separated out of the original design as per council direction within the 2023 budget. May I please have a mover to get this on the floor? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson, and I will now call on Director of Community Services, Sandy Jackson, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. Through you to Council, this report seeks Council approval to award the construction of the Nith River Promenade Trail and lighting enhancements as outlined in the recommendations to Lincon Construction Incorporated as per the capital budget approved earlier this year. The objectives of the project include addressing erosion challenges, improving the slope and construction of the pathways to make them more accessible, improving access to the Nith River for water sports and pedestrian use, which is expected to encourage patronage in the adjacent commercial district. Staff have verified that Lincon Construction has the experience and equipment necessary to complete the project, and the cost proposal they submitted through the RFP process was $105,000 below budget. That's really a nice surprise. As Council is aware, during the budget process, a number of items were removed from the scope of work in an effort to reduce the project budget by about $200,000. Some of the items identified by staff to achieve this included alternate lighting design, eliminating the relocation of the electrical panel, eliminating the removal and disposal of existing light poles and fixtures, replacing the pollinator plants with grass seed, and eliminating the armor stone seating on the trail. After this report was submitted for the agenda, staff reached out to Lincon Construction and sought a price to reinstate these features, and they came back to us with a price of $30,000. If these items are included in the project, a balance of available funds of approximately $75,000 will remain out of that $105,000 that was identified in the recommendation. So staff are recommending that these funds be retained within the project budget as the additional $75,000 as emergency contingency in case unanticipated costs associated with this project come up. It is a challenging embankment to work on for these folks, so just ensuring that they can complete it accordingly is what is recommended. And should Council support this approach, any additional funds not used during construction would reduce the debt financing requirement accordingly. I'm happy to answer any questions about the report or about the project, and I'm sure Director Kelly can handle the debt questions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much, Director Jackson. Oh, there are questions before I even get there. Councillor Sadhu.
Through the Mayor to Director Jackson, just for clarification, You're saying 30,000 out of the 105, and the 70 would just be a contingency?
Through the mayor, yes. So the 30,000 will reinstate those items, put that seating back in, address the alternate lighting proposal, the removal of the existing light standards was going to be done by staff. It'll now be able to be done under this contract. And it just keeps it much more contained and consistent with one contractor. They'll do all of that work for $30,000. So their initial price that was identified in the recommendation would be increased by that amount, but I am seeking that the full amount be identified as available to the project in case they run into contingencies issues.
Any follow-up questions, Councillor Sadhu?
Just a general question. Has it been past practice? I see we have township staff removing light fixtures, et cetera. Is that stuff that has been done in the past leading up to now, or we just leave that scope of work to the contractors?
Through the mayor, it could be done in-house. We're certainly not electricians, but it is, something that staff could do if you prefer to leave that piece out of this estimate. It's just a lot safer to have one contractor working without staff trying to do that in the midst of a project. But it is a possibility if that is council's preference. We're not super loaded with staff time this time of year because we're opening all our fields and getting all of our horticulture beds prepared. So it would be helpful if we didn't have the additional work, but they can do it if that's council's preference.
Councillor Wilkinson, did you have any questions?
My questions were along the same lines, or through you, Mayor. My questions were along the same lines as Councillor Sadhu here. So I guess just to reiterate, I mean, obviously this is good news, and there's budget left over to obviously account for any potential unforeseen costs, which is great, and then barring that, we can obviously reduce the debt. So I think that overall, this is great. I appreciate you bringing it forward. I would echo what Councillor Sadhu had mentioned. It would be nice, and by no means am I giving direction or proposing that we give direction this time, but to maybe explore down the road what we have staff doing to potentially mitigate the costs that are associated with projects, in the sense that if there is pre-work or advanced work that can be done to lower costs, then I think we should be pursuing that. But overall, thank you.
If I could add to that, Mayor, there are a number of projects that staff fully complete without any contractor work at all, depending on the skill set required. A lot of work on these projects is done in-house within this department. So just with such a large scope project, it's easier and safer just not to sort of segregate pieces of it. But there's been many projects where staff either work with contractors or do full projects on their own. So it's a great question. Thank you.
Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, to Patrick, just in terms of when you give somebody notice that there's 75,000 contingency, is that a red flag to say suddenly there is contingency, or how does this how does this work?
Through the mayor, I can answer that, Councillor. Any change would be required through a change notice. We would not accept just additional costs randomly. The fee that they have identified as the total cost of the project remains that, and they can't go over that unless it's approved by our project coordinator. So we would safely not be approving anything with that unless they ran into some serious issues on the site.
Thank you.
And Councillor Martin, I'll just give you the option as everybody else has had a chance to speak. Do you have any questions on this?
Through you, Mayor Sallin. No, thank you. I don't have any questions. What I'm hearing sounds good. I appreciate your comments, Director Jackson.
Great. Well, with that done then, all of those in favor? And that carries unanimously. We have received 3 different letters of correspondence this evening. Those are attached to the agenda and council has already read through them. And as for our bylaws, the recommendation is that bylaw items 14.1 and 14.2 as attached to this agenda be read a first, second, and third time and finally passed in open council. and that bylaw item 14.3 as attached to this agenda be read for a first and second time and be brought back to council at a future date for a third reading. May I please have a mover?
If I may,
Oh, yes.
I'd like to move bylaw 14.2 out just for a brief question. So through you, Mayor, would like to move 14.2 out for questioning. Just simply, there wasn't a ton of background information provided on this, so we'd just like some clarification as to what exactly we're passing with regards to creating a new highway.
Sure.
Thank you.
Most certainly. Just give me one quick second to confer with the clerk on logistically the next steps. Oh. Okay, we will turn it over to Director Okrafka instead.
Thank you, Mayor Salem, and to Councillor Wilkinson. It is a bylaw to open a stretch of Milton Street. There was recently a severance, a redevelopment, the old Riddell House. So as a condition of that severance, road widening was taken by the township, and that has been now conveyed to the township. So technically, to ensure that it becomes part of the formal street road allowance, this bylaw is then passed and registered in order to officially make it part of Milton Street. But we do own the land already. That transaction has occurred. This is simply dotting the i's and crossing the t's.
Thank you.
Any other questions on our bylaws, councillors? Okay, seeing none, may I please have a mover for this recommendation? Moved by Councillor Sadoo, seconded by Councillor Martin, and all of those in favor. And that carries unanimously. So we do have, at least I have a number of announcements this evening. So first off, this evening is both sad and exciting, as for the last 3 years, the Township of Wilmot's Community Services Department has been blessed with a very personable and effective leader, Sandy Jackson, our Director of Community Services. I'm sad to say and announce that it is Director Jackson's last council meeting, and actually a few minutes ago she just gave her last report to council. And her last day at the township is actually going to be this Friday, May the 12th. So on behalf of council and the Township of Wilmot, we want to thank you for your passionate and dedicated leadership to our team and contributions to our community. And congratulations on your very much well-deserved retirement. We wish you the very best on your next chapter. And also, I know that CAO Chambers wanted to add a few words.
Yes, Sandy. Last council meeting of how many do you think in your career in 30 years?
I don't even know, but I know this is my 9th council that I have worked for. 4-year terms, 9 councils. The best, absolutely the best.
Yes, and I just wanted to say on behalf of staff and the corporate leadership team, thank you so much for the contributions that you've given over the years that you've been here. Certainly playing double duty as the interim CIO and the Director of Parks and Recreation at the time. I know you probably didn't get a lot of time to yourself during that time and throw in COVID to boot. So we really appreciate your hard work and the dynamic that you brought to the team. We're going to miss your leadership, and I wish you all the best in your retirement, and I hope you enjoy all of the recreation facilities that you've been working so hard to create and support over the years.
Thank you.
And more municipal business. Due to the changing needs of our growing community and the need to create a more user-friendly bylaw, the municipal law enforcement for the Township of Wilmot would like to modernize our current noise bylaw through various public consultation opportunities. So residents are invited to provide feedback through an online survey that is now open and available until Friday, June the 9th at 4:30 p.m. Residents are also invited to engage with staff and provide feedback in person if preferred at the following locations, which is Thursday, May 11th at the Active Living Center inside of the Wilmot Recreation Complex between 11 a.m. and 12 p.m., as well as Saturday, May 13th at the Wilmot Rec Complex between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. For more information and access to the online survey, please visit wilmot.ca/bylaw reviews. And the month of May is also a very busy month for recognition of items. So May is known as Mental Health Month in Canada. and it is a time to raise awareness about mental health and encourage people to prioritize their mental health well-being. We must work together to reduce the stigma surrounding mental illness and promote access to resources and support those who may be struggling. For more information, please visit cmha.ca. I feel like I'm a radio announcer right now. For Lyme Disease Awareness Month also happens to be in the month of May. And it is to educate people about the signs, symptoms, and prevention of Lyme disease, a tick-borne illness that can have serious health consequences if left untreated. I would like to note, being a dog owner, get your flea and tick items for your dogs, because they can also attract Lyme's disease. It's not just in humans. But for more information, please visit canlyme.com. And lastly, May is also Museum Month, which is an initiative of the Ontario Museum Association and is celebrated by the over 700 museums, galleries, and heritage sites in Ontario. It's an opportunity to celebrate the important contributions of museums like Wilmot's own Castle Kilbride to their communities. The celebration also coincides with International Museum Day on May 18th, which is a worldwide initiative of the International Council of Museums. Councillors, do any of you have announcements you would like to share? No? All right, seeing that I took all of the announcements, there is no business arising from closed session. So the confirmatory bylaw recommendation is that, as attached to this agenda, be read a first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. May I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And lastly, may I please have a mover to adjourn? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you.